I don't need to say anything else. That was very impressive. Thank you, Sylvie. Geez Louise. When I, in my former life, would put a story on paper and it would go out in the newspaper to an audience, I never had any idea how many people my stories were actually being seen by. So I'm honored that all of you are here tonight because I get to see my audience. So thank you. Now I lost my train of thought. You'll have to bear with me. I haven't done public speaking in several years, so that's kind of, and it's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about Zimmerman's 12-mile store, and I am blessed and fortunate to say that there are some members of the family in attendance tonight who I really hope are going to share some stories, because I've got some from shopping up there, but I think their stories are going to be better than mine. And if we're really lucky, we will find out once and for all where the sign is. Like Sylvie said, I've been a 47-year resident of Gresham, and I spent 21 years with Pamplin Media and the Gresham Outlook as an editor and a journalist, staff reporter. I actually got to work with Sylvie the first time around when she was here, when I was on staff and was doing historical research, and it was like, oh, well, I'm going to the museum, and everybody in the office knew they wouldn't see me again for the rest of the afternoon. But I am also a former Zimmermans shopper. I did not know Ada and Carl, but I was more of the Gaylord era in the 80s, and there's some interesting stories about that, too. But in the late 1800s, there was a local businessman by the name of Joseph Engels who opened a small storefront to provide essentials for the farmers that lived nearby. This eventually would become known as 12 Mile Corner. And the reason why it was 12 Mile Corner, for those who don't know, is it was, at the time, 12 miles from downtown Portland, where City Hall was. Now, if you're driving east on Stark over here, look on the right-hand side of the road, especially when you get down to the Rockwood area, and you're going to see cement pillars. They're kind of pointed at the top, and they've got a number on them. Those are the mile markers from downtown Portland. What Engels did not know when he opened his storefront in the late 1800s was that he was setting a tradition for one capacity or another for a grocery store or mercantile store to be in that location on 223rd and Stark for almost 100 years. His store flourished, and in 1895, a gentleman by the name of George Kinney came along and purchased the one-room store, and I know I'm getting it right because Ken's over here nodding his head. Yes! Mr. Kinney added a post office and increased and expanded his inventory to better serve the community that the store was in, which at the time, up on that corner, was called Terry. Then there entered George Washington Page, actually. He was a Canadian transplant, and he took a liking to the property and purchased the store in 1919. He sold the business to his brother-in-law, Edward Aylesworth, in 1933. Together with his wife, Minnie, Edward and Minnie ran the store until 1938, when they leased it to Ada and Carl Zimmerman. And Ada and Carl, 1938, I apologize, and Ada and Carl purchased the store in 1943. Zimmerman's 12-mile store was the only local supermarket in the area for many, many years. But what put the business on the map was their creative and innovative owner. Carl Zimmerman was considered a forward thinker, far ahead of his peers when it came to courting and keeping customers. Zimmerman's was the first store to be open 24 hours a day, provide delivery service, and offer an inventory that ranged from hardware and appliances to school supplies and groceries. Also had a gourmet section in the store where you would find chocolate-covered ants and grasshoppers. True, is that a true story? Okay, thank you. There was also, Carl put in a roof-mounted swamp cooler so that people could shop in air-conditioned comfort in the summer. In 1956, a major store remodel included the installation of a giant spinning gyroscope to the top of the tower on the front of the building. And shortly after that, Carl installed carillon chimes as a gift to Ada because she was fond of bells. The chimes were programmed to play every hour on the hour and could be heard all over. And I know that's true because we lived on 205th and Stark, and you could hear them down there. For more than 50 years, that sign stayed on the top of that building and created a landmark on 223rd and Stark. And it was a directional beacon for both residents and visitors as well. But Carl was mostly and widely regarded as a master of marketing. There was not a gimmick that wasn't off the table where Carl was concerned. He once pitched live turkeys off the roof so that people could have a free bird for their holiday dinner. He brought Santa Claus in by helicopter, and after one very heavy snowfall, there was a huge mound of a drift of snow in the parking lot. He named it Mount Zim, and he offered prizes to those who could accurately predict when it would melt. He offered pony rides to children in the parking lot during the summers, and even had a live buffalo in a pen one year. Sadly, that buffalo ended out on buns in the soda fountain a little while later. And then when Rockwood Fred Meyer had their grand opening in 1957, Carl hired a plane to tow a banner welcoming the new neighbor from Zim's shopping center, of course. Carl was also a bit of a philanthropist. He believed in taking care of his neighbors. During World War II, he and Ada stored belongings for the Japanese Americans that were from the community and had been sent to relocation camps. When they returned home, they returned their goods to them so they had something that they could start out with. Carl was also drafted himself. He ended up at Fort Lewis in Washington State, where he would purchase the cars of deploying soldiers, drive them back to Gresham, and Ada resold them. And then following the 1948 flood that wiped out Vanport in North Portland, the Zimmermans delivered food, canned goods, rope, and coffee to those out that had lost everything in the flood. But Carl's aim was to make Zimmermans, quote, the friendliest store in the nation. And to that end, he had some recordings. We're not really sure if he's on the recording or if this was somebody else, but he did some audio recordings that were eventually going to become radio commercials. And let's listen to a couple of those, please.
I buy my food in the country, not far from the Gresham fair. Just head for the 12-mile corner, old Zim will meet you there. It's fun to shop at Zimmy's, sure I'm Scotch, there is no doubt. So I park in the lot in my favorite spot, 'cause there's bargains all about. I buy my food in the country, not far from the Gresham fair. Just head for the 12-mile corner, old Zim will meet you there. Just look for the lighted tower and the swivel light on top. Then park in the lot in your favorite spot. To the door it's just a hop. I buy my food in the country, not far from the Gresham fair. Just head for the 12-mile corner, old Zim will meet you there. It's fun to shop at Zimmy's, there's everything good to eat. Just park in a lot in your favorite spot, it's the place where old friends meet.
So to ensure his mission started at the door to create this friendliest store in the nation, Carl hand-typed a 12-page employee handbook of sorts. It was probably copied on a mimeograph machine and distributed to his new hires. For anybody that would like to look at it, this is a copy of it. The original first page is back in the display case, but this is hilarious. I have no idea what date. There was no date noted on it, but some of the things were very interesting. In the handbook, Carl explained the fundamentals of the sales in the grocery store business and what it took to retain customers. Fair prices, high quality, and of course, courteous and friendly service. Carl required his employees wear a name badge at all times when they were working. They were instructed to lay down the welcome mat to each customer by greeting them with, "Good morning, ma'am," "Good afternoon, sir." The dress code concluded, quote, "a conservative tie, plain white shirt, creased trousers, and shined shoes for the men. For the women, a fresh smock, quote, just enough makeup, no conspicuous jewelry, and flat-heeled shined shoes." Along with clear instructions for each position in the store, the handling of money and how to cash a customer's check, Carl's handbook also touched on tips for ways to win customers. Don't offend, this is a quote, "Don't offend your customers by smoking or eating on the job." That was number one on the list. Now, looking at this group, I remember vividly when I was shopping at Zim's with these two little kids back in the day, and this is in the 80s, you could still smoke. Does anybody else remember you could still smoke when you were grocery shopping? I mean, I remember being in the produce department with these two little kids, and there were women with cigarette hanging out of their mouth picking up bananas, and when they were done, you'd throw it on the floor and put it out. I swear to God, that's a true story. Other notables to Carl's handbook included, illustrate how happy you are at work by stepping up your courteous service. Quote, not by whistling, humming, or singing, which almost always irritates customers. Chewing gum is a sales killer. Quote, don't ruin your impression by mumbling through a mouthful of gum. And lastly, and this is a quote, good storekeeping takes good housekeeping. Madam Housewife loves to shop in a clean, spotless, well-stocked store. Do your part by keeping your work area spick and span. Carl died from a heart attack in 1959. Ada continued to run the business for 10 years until in 1969 she leased the store to Chuck Gaylord. He ran it until he kept with the family tradition of running a family-owned business, and with his daughter, his two sons, and his wife until the early 90s when he retired. Chuck subleased Zim's to Don and Kathy Yeager, who changed the name to Zim's Red Apple as a nod to the corporate wholesaler Associated Grocers of Seattle. Don Yeager unfortunately died of a heart attack, a car accident, I apologize, in 1992. Kathy ran the store for another year and officially shuttered the business in 1993, which meant for the first time in nearly 100 years, the corner of 12 Mile Corner, 223rd and Stark, was no longer home to a grocery store. The building had a brief second life in the late 1990s when it housed Zim's Sports Plaza, which was a motorcycle and ATV dealership, and you remember that one, I'm guessing. Ada died in 1998. The landmark sign, recognized by so many, was removed in 2005 and returned to the Zimmerman family. 12 Mile Corner is now home to Weston Kia, and I can tell you without the shadow of a doubt that my family supports whatever is on that corner because we own 3 Kias. So what I'm hopeful for, another funny story, and I'm hoping what this will do is kind of bring to light you guys adding to this. Back to the early days when I was shopping at the store when my kids were little, I remember my son was very small. And this is back in the days when they still put price tags on food, real with the price gun. And I was in the produce department, and I had the younger one in a front pack, and he was tiny. And his sister All the little old ladies all of a sudden that were up there shopping were looking at me, and they were smiling and they were nodding their head, and I'm thinking, what is going on? And I looked down at this poor little boy who's totally out to lunch, and he's got 29 cents up his arm on these price tags. Come to find out, my daughter was peeling the price tags off bananas, putting them on his arms and his legs, and then telling all the ladies that he was for sale. Ken, is there anything that you would like to add to the stories? Because like I said, I did not know Ada and Carl. Sure. And so if you have any fun, humorous, good stories you'd like to share, we'd love it.
Sure, thank you.
And then we're going to eventually go back and find out where the sign is.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Please.
Yeah, so I didn't know my grandfather. He died before I was born, but I knew him through the stories that our family would tell. And obviously the store itself. A lot of my family worked there, not just my grandma and grandpa. My mom would, when she got on a pony at 3 years old, they were sold, and so they were into ponies from then on. And so she would take a little wagon and go through the neighborhood selling ice cream with her pony wagons. So in addition to the pony wheel, they were part of the whole thing. I had uncles that had the feed store in the back where you could get your little spring chickens and all the different kind of things. And I remember going back there and seeing all of that kind of stuff. They had a Davy Crockett gun that a lot of kids, a lot of people my age remember playing with that thing, trying to win that game. That little rocket out front and stuff. I was a young kid, reminded me. So there were, and then the ball, I remember we lived on the west side and would come over and visit all the time. And I remember coming up that hill and seeing that ball just lit up at night, turning it as it did, and it was just always a fun beacon. It was actually not only a beacon for visitors, but it was also a beacon for early air travel. They would use that as a marker for coming into Portland. And matter of fact, airplanes still, it's the major route for coming into Portland. If you've flown from the east side, it comes through that side. So Grandpa also worked with Rockwood Water to bring water into the area, sewer into the area. He donated across the street the place for the sheriff's office and the fire station that was there for a long time. Ended up being a hair salon and all kinds of different things. But so he was very involved with the community, very knowledgeable. He'd lovingly tease his customers, the ones that he'd know really well, over the loudspeaker in the store. It was a very community-oriented, friendly, non-offensive kind of place. And one of their phrases was, "If it's not here, we'll get it." So he would always be on the lookout for new kind of things. We saw loads of trade magazines. After Grandma passed, she kept them all too. So I don't know what they were doing with that.
Some of them here.
Yeah, some of them here. Yep. Mm-hmm. We've got loads of publicity pictures. We even have a fun one that I found recently where Grandpa on one of those commercial things, it was sitting behind a microphone for KGON, my rocker grandfather. But yeah, he did have several different helicopters, and he was very forward-thinking because that was what's going to be the next thing was everybody's going to have, instead of a car in their driveway, they're going to have helicopters, and we're going to all transport that way. I guess I was thinking Jetsons or something before the Jetsons were a thing. And then Grandma, after Grandpa died, she had $1 million in debt with that because Grandpa was such an entrepreneur. And so many people told her, "Ada, you gotta sell. Just let it go." And she said, "No, I'm gonna keep this." And so she took in that 10 years, she went from $1 million in debt to being profitable by the time she retired. I tell my, excuse me. She was a woman entrepreneur, and that goes through to my family today. For strong women, and we believe in that, and we've supported that. Grandma started the East County Optimists. She was always for promoting business for women, for giving them opportunities. So, proud moments.
Should be.
Can you tell about when they got married and why? So they got married on Christmas Day, because that was the only day the store was closed.
My wife says that.
I did not know that. That's
Yeah.
cool.
And every time they would go on vacation, it was always to a convention of some kind or a horse show or something like that. It was always a business-oriented kind of thing. So, any questions from you folks for me or my sister? Hello, sister.
How did they come up with the design for the ball on the top?
Sure, they partnered with Ramsey Signs back in the 40s and wanted a very forward-thinking kind of spacey kind of thing. And so that's where they got the globe and also the star in the middle. So there was also a similar thing with the, what was that restaurant in Rockwood? The
Satellite.
Satellite, yeah. So people kind of tied those together. Yes?
Modeled off of a gyroscope.
Thank you, Zia. He is my niece, my brother's daughter. Thank you.
Okay, so the $25,000 question. Zia, you know the answer to this one too.
Sure, I'll keep talking.
Where's the sign?
Well, I will make you guys turn around. Really draw out the cliffhanger, you know what I mean? And you can all hear me okay? No. Okay, I won't use the mic. The sign.
Zia.
Oh, should I use it? Okay, I'll use it.
There we go.
Hello. I'll use my inside voice now. The sign is currently in our barn. Ada and Carl had a 30-acre farm out on Division, of which I grew up on that farm. And inside of our giant barn that was once used for dairy farmers is the sign. It's not in its global glory, but it is there in all of its pieces. And that's what I know.
Carillon bells are at
Oh, are they at Susan's now?
Susan's, and they
Oh,
still
I thought they were
work.
still, yeah, they still work. It's true.
What are there any plans for this?
Well, something of that scale would require a lot of crane work and a lot of, I mean, it would take some oomph, but anyway, it's, yeah, the sign's safe and sound from the weather and the
Okay,
ice.
so now we know that it's still in existence because
That's the record.
and in
Yeah.
Gresham, exactly, because that's probably been one of the biggest questions. Yes.
Yeah.
I hope that you ask the library if they'll put that on top.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? Oh, wouldn't that be
That's a
fun?
good idea.
I feel like we could recreate the whole building with how many bricks that people took. I feel like everybody has a little piece of Sims, you know? Anyway, that's the sign.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the thing that I appreciate you guys sharing your knowledge too, but I think the thing I remember most of all about Zims was it was a family operation and you felt like family as a customer. And when I was, again, I'm back to stories about myself, but when the second time I got pregnant, I went into Dr. Bob Davis, who ran the pharmacy, and I told him, I said, oh, you got to stock up on prenatals. And he was all excited, and he thought that was so wonderful. And then 2 weeks later, I had to go back and tell him, nope, don't take out a stock on the prenatals. But 6 weeks later, I told him he had to do it again. And so that was my son. But I was shopping at Zim's not long after Christopher was born, and Pat Gaylord grabbed me on my way out the door and dropped a stuffed giraffe in one of my grocery bags, and she said, that's for the baby. They always treated, whether it was the Gaylords, and like I said, I did not know Ada and Carl, but the Gaylords still treated us like family. Does anybody else have any stories they'd like to share about shopping at Zim's?
I remember the noon whistle. My dad used to have a service station down by Keno's on 182nd.
The noon whistle.
And start, or on 181st and start, the Texaco station.
Really?
And we could hear the noon whistle. And they also have it for the volunteer firemen.
And that the noon whistle, did that come from Zim's too? Really? I don't remember. That must have been discontinued by the time I arrived out here. So that's kind of cool. Anybody else have anything to share and add? Yes, ma'am.
How many sign S&H green stamps?
Yes.
Maybe you can educate a lot of these younger people what that.
Okay, S&H green stamps, and I'm dating myself on this one because I don't know that I ever got them from Zim's, but I did. They had a redemption center down on Holgate and 122nd or something. 82nd, thank you. And I don't remember, was it for so many dollars you spent, you got the little stamps, you had books that they went in, and there's a lot of head nodding, I don't feel so bad now. And then when you collected so many stamps, you could take your books of stamps and go down to the Redemption Center and get a toaster, you know, I mean, it was, when did they discontinue? Washing machines?
They did all kinds of stuff. We had, it was one of the largest redemption centers east of the Willamette River, so we'd have people come from all over to do their redemption at Zim.
So Zim's did do redemption at one time? That must have been pre-Anne, because I remember getting the stamps, but I had to go down to Holgate to do it. I'll be darned. I'll be darned.
Grandma's initials were A and Z, and so she said she had everything from A to Z.
That's cute, A to Z. I like that. When did they discontinue the green stamps? Do you remember? See, I don't remember either. I know I got them when I first started shopping there. Does that help? So now we know how green stamps came to be?
Oh, I experienced that.
Yeah.
Roller skates, I got my roller skates.
You got roller skates, okay.
In California, but yeah, the same kind of.
That's cool. That's cool. Somebody had a question. Yes, ma'am.
I remember going there, and the kids were young. One time I fell down the lip or something. I don't remember actually the store shopping cart, but I would go in there, and I would buy my postage stamps, and I would pay all my bills.
That's true. They did have the bill paying.
I saw the sign on the truck when I got hauled away, so I'm so happy to know that it is safe in a barn.
I do remember that now that you mention it. I know they had Western Union, and I think you could pay your utility bills there as well.
Utilities is one stop, and buy your stamps.
And I think the thing that surprised me, Sylvie mentioned this in the introduction, but what started my time with the museum, she did. She had me locked in a corner scanning photos. And these were from the photo center at Zim's. And they were fascinating because, number one, they were mostly from the 50s and the 60s, but early 60s. But what always bothered me is I found wedding pictures. Who in the world would walk away and leave wedding pictures at a photo place? You know, I mean, it was surprising what people left.
I was surprised Ada kept them all.
There's a box full, trust me.
It was.
Trust me. But it was neat. It was awfully neat. Yes, ma'am.
I remember, this was before the freezers at home, and this is late 40s, early 50s. My parents would go once a week to the locker at Zim's where they rented the freezer locker.
You could rent locker space. That's cool.
Pick up the meat for the week that we were going to use, get back home.
And that was back in the 40s and 50s, Marty?
They do meat lockers, so if
You know, I remember that.
they dress it there, you can keep it there.
There was a butcher. Did you rent a meat locker too? I seem to remember that. They were doing that. I think they might have done that even when Gaylord owned it. And he, interesting.
So one of my favorite stories from my mother-in-law.
Because they got the camera running. Come here, come here.
So my mother-in-law was Carolyn Schonk, and that's my name as well. One of my favorite stories from her is that they would bring home the cans from the store that had labels removed. So at night, it's like, okay, what are we having for dinner? Well, this one's dog food, so that goes to the dogs, and let's see what's in this can. And it was always kind of a, what's for dinner tonight? Because they would bring home the unlabeled cans.
Thank you for telling that story. I couldn't figure out how to bring it in, but I thought it was hilarious. It is. There was a butcher at Zim's by the name of Tony. Nicest man. This is, again, back in the Gaylord years. But he was a very nice man. He knew me. And I was in the process of letting my hair grow and the color grow out. And to get over that, the ladies in the room will understand this, you get over the racing stripe where you've got the normal color coming in. And so we did a perm. It wasn't pretty. But I walked into the store and Tony looked at me and he goes, "Why did you do that? You were such a pretty girl." And I was like, Oh, I'll go home and put a bag on my head until this is grown out, I guess. Good times. Anybody else have anything they want to share? There's got to be. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a story from after Zim's closed.
Come here.
When you were talking about it being a landmark, this is, you'll appreciate this because you know who I'm about to talk about.
Okay.
So I came to the States in the year 2000, and my husband, his family are from this area, and they lived on 223rd, actually, some of them. And it's my first time here, and he drives us to his aunt and uncle's house. And they have lived there for probably 20 years at this point. And we come in from Lincoln City, and we come up, we're on stock. Wait for the sign. We turn at the sign. And there was no sign because it had just come down. We were in Troutdale, but we actually hit the river. So, but yeah, it was because he couldn't see anything but the sign, because the sign was that was the community, that was where you did things. So yeah, I mean, I've been in Gresham since 2006, and the stories I've heard about Sims, I mean, so many stories about Sims, and they're all great stories, and they're all about how wonderful the people were.
It was a family operation.
Yeah. So, thanks.
Thank you. You sure you don't have anything to add? You're sure? Okay, but we got at least as far as the meat locker, so that's impressive. Anybody else got anything they want to share? This is cool. I'm learning a lot. You can only read so much in a book, and I'm so grateful for you guys being here. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I remember the soda fountain, the lunch counter. That was so much fun. And we'd ride our bikes to Zim's, and, after berry picking or whatever. And,
Do you remember the name of that place? Because I remember the soda fountain myself, but I couldn't, for the life of me, remember the name of it.
No, I don't.
Our older sister worked at it. We'll go home and ask her. And just to reiterate what he said about Ada Zimmerman supporting women, our mother worked there in the 60s. She was in the business. She did payroll. Yeah, she was one of the bookkeepers.
She was in the business office. Okay.
There were just two women, and I don't know if at that point in time men would have done that job. I don't know, but there were two women, and that might attest to your statement about your grandmother wanting to support women. But yeah, and the business office was such that it had windows, and so if we went there after school or something, we could go walk in and wave at our mother who was up in the business. Yeah, there were windows down there.
Up there?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zim's was kind of like, the point that you related everything else to. It's kind of like, how good, everything's related to. It was a big thing in the Gresham area.
I was surprised. It was a big thing, and the sign was iconic in its own respect. But I think that anybody who shopped in there, anybody that stopped in there, it was just a very nice place to be, and he always did have a very spick and span store. And so I think that was what really made it, was the fact that it was not just this landmark, but it was where everybody ended out at one point in time or another.
I was part of the faculty at Clear Creek Middle School when it opened in 1991, I believe it opened.
I'm going to need you to come up here because you're telling more stories.
I was so happy because, on the way home, I could stop and do my grocery shopping at Zim's. And within like a year, I just was gone. So my great grocery shopping spot was all this.
Well, it was sad. I mean, I've been out here since 1977, and it was sad when it finally went away. I remember one day I went up there in a blazing rainstorm, picked up a few groceries, went, and this is back in the days way before debit cards, and I went to get my checkbook out of my purse, and I didn't have it. And they said, well, just leave it here, go home, get your checkbook, and come back. And nobody would do that now. No, they got to back the order out, and you got to go home and come back and start over. It was, they trusted people, and I think that's what was actually made it what it was more than anything. I kind of miss it, you know, because you could go in and you could get in and out. And that's what I liked. And it was a family operation. Well, you guys have been great. I really, really am. It's so nice for me to be able to see my audience, like I said. So I'm grateful for your attendance tonight, and certainly to the family. Thank you for taking your evening to come in and join us. And I hope I did the story decent. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. That's good. Yes, thank you, Ken. All right, Sylvie, it's up to you. Thank you very much for your time, you guys.